कोई ठक ठक तीसी ते एक्शन जे पैर निकलो ना डोवे
नहीं कुछ नहीं होएगा. I think if anything Hassan Lala, I feel कि people appreciated कि किसी ने कुछ तो कहा है, कुछ तो बात हुई है ना?
See, I think it's important that the conversation has started.
Absolutely. Okay, we are now. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Kaarvan Crafts Foundation. Today's session is it's unique in the sense that for a long time I've had many people come on board and talk about how the digital realm is changing lives and it's connecting people and it's pushing forth avenues for a variety of things, whether it's business, whether it's culture, whether it's strategy. But this session today, I'm immensely pleased to say that it's brought forth a whole movement. I'd like to introduce you to Hassan Hussain Qureshi, who is a British Pakistani digital media consultant, sports analyst, and agriculturalist based in Lahore. He has also written for national and international publications on cricket, politics, and culture. Now, before we delve in, I just like to share the story that Hassan Lala and we connected on Twitter when he put out this idea of starting a Seraiki podcast. For those of you who don't know, Seraiki is now known to be a language that is spoken mostly around Multan and Bahawalpur, those two regions being the most obvious ones, but South Punjab. And then there are further dialects connected to it, such as Jingochi. This is not entirely true. It doesn't really capture, because being Seraiki is actually a form of an identity. It's a culture, it's a mindset, it's a lost heritage. And at one point, it was even a geographical location. Now, what people refer to as very casually the Seraiki belt, it was actually an entire area of its own, and it had its Nawabs. Balke Hassan Lara is a Nawab himself, and he has a very rich family legacy. And so, given the rise of indigenous cultures, we thought that we'd have a session on this. And I'm very proud that the first one to start this off is a Seraiki culture, given my own personal interest as well, and my own family background, hailing from the Seraiki belt now. So, Hassan Lala, thank you so very much for coming on board to do this. It is greatly, greatly appreciated.
Thank you so much for having me, Meherji. Thank you so much for all your help in getting the podcast started. You know, it started off as a little germ, and now it's parlay current speak, it's a full-blown virus. It's gone up. You know, people are engaging with us, talking about it. We've somehow managed to put out 3 episodes. And the best thing is we've done it in our native language. We've done it in Seraiki, which for a lot of people has become a dormant language, or, it's just like a chaya, it's a little quaint little dialect. It's not. We've got millions of speakers. We're the only language of Pakistan that's found in almost all 4 provinces. And yet there is this, like you said, a lot of people might not even know about us. The Seraiki belt is the kind of belt that would go around a very heavy set man. It's a big belt. It goes from Multan to Diyai Khan, it goes into Balochistan, into large part of Sindh, KPK, right. But somehow us Seraikis, we're seen as this little quaint group of people who'll get together over a cup of tea and speak in some old language. And as you mentioned, Multan's history and heritage and culture goes back thousands of years. It's part of the earliest civilizations of the subcontinent. So thank you for letting me come on and talk about this. It's our shared heritage that we share with millions, not just here in Pakistan, but in the diaspora. The largest number of Pakistanis working overseas in the Gulf come from the Seraiki belt. And then there are people in India, there are people all over the world. So, it's important that we step up and take back control of the narrative for our identity.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And it's really interesting to see because, Hassan Lala, what we found is that when it comes to things, tangible things, such as craft, such as clothing, such as homeware, people are very happy to market this as an indigenous cultural item. But when it comes to the grander scheme of things, such as representation, such as literature, even something as non-tangible as music, it's it's not really recognized. Why do you feel that Pakistan's indigenous cultures have completely been sort of, they're just ever sold as a handicraft thing at some airport, and that's it? There's no as such recognition. What do you think has caused that recognition? Is it our fault, civil society, that we've not owned it? Or is it state failure that they've not bolstered it? What is it?
I think it's Meherji is definitely a bit of both. You see, the state, when there's
Yeah.
no pressure on it from civil society to go ahead and promote something, it won't. We keep hearing
Yeah.
the state constantly. People keep harking back to the time of Quaid-e-Azam himself saying that Urdu will be the language of Pakistan, and Urdu is what Pakistanis will be known for. At no point did he say that Urdu will go at the expense of other languages. Whereas
Yes.
we've always had this movement that till at least, obviously the War of 71, we had the Bengali issue before that, but even after that with the one unit, and this idea that West Pakistan is this one homogenous unit where everybody speaks Urdu. Urdu is a very important part of Pakistani identity. It's our national language. I think Pakistanis have done everything in their power to promote Urdu. They've done a very good job at it. But let's not forget that so many of our best writers in Urdu come from Punjabi backgrounds, come from Seraiki backgrounds, come from Sindhi backgrounds. And the state will not take the step unless it sees the citizens, especially civil society, take forth that step and say, look, why are we not teaching our languages? I mean, it amazes me that in Multan and in Bahalpur, you don't have a Seraiki Institute. Bahauddin Zakariya University, the most respected university in the region, only got one in 2016. The language goes back thousands of years. How can we justify that it's only been 4 years? That is because there isn't an interest. On the podcast, yourself and I, we both spoke about the fact that, there was a sort of reluctance amongst our parents to pass the language down to us. It's something we picked up in passing, we picked up in interacting with other people. My late father found out I spoke Seraiki for the first time when we went for Umrah. He thought I was clueless. He thought I had no idea what was going on. And then he looked at me and said, well, how did you pick it up? And I said, Abu, it's all that's spoken at home. It's all you people speak all the time. I'm bound to pick it up. It would have been nicer if the effort had been made to teach it to me formally. And then therein comes another problem. We are fast becoming a language that doesn't have a written history. It's becoming an oral language and one that if we're not careful within a generation or two, will disappear. So to go back to your earlier question, G, I think it is definitely both civil society and the state, but it's up to civil society to put the pressure on the state that we want to reclaim our indigenous languages. We're seeing it done in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. We're seeing it done in Sindh. Balochistan has that problem only because there aren't that many people, even though it's the largest province. But Seraikis need to now reclaim the space. And we need to go out there and say, look, we want our language also to be recognized and we want it to be discussed.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you there. I feel that we've sort of, and I sound like a broken record, but I feel that the importance of this has not been understood as yet by our generation. We are the generation that grew up in the shadow of 9/11. I was, I think, 17 or 18 years old when 9/11 happened. I'm now 36. I mean, the past 20 years have been spent sort of fighting off this identity that's thrust upon us. If you're a Pakistani, you're a Muslim. If you're a Muslim, you're a terrorist. And while we've spent all our time sort of saying, I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not this, I think we just spent so long fighting off all these labels, these tags, these categories, that it's now hitting us that in spending and utilizing our energy in all of that, we never really built something in terms of creating an identity for ourselves or even capitalizing on what our parents, our forefathers, what they gave us. And this is true on a national level. This is true when I look at the Sindhis. This is true when I look at the Pathans. This is true when I look at the Punjabis. This is true when I look at the Balochis. It's there. We've just been fighting off these identities that have been thrust upon us. And now we're sitting and we're thinking, acha, hun tusi kaun ho? Te tusi kaun ho? Te tu kaun hai? Tu kithu aaye hai?
Exactly.
Now it's like we're trying to figure out who we are. It's a pity. It's a pity. But do you feel that there is still plenty of time to build upon this and offer something tangible? I mean,
Absolutely.
efforts have been made for representation in government. For example, the Shidi community has produced a wonderful politician.
Yes.
I remember one of the Sindhi ladies walked into parliament and she was wearing her kanga and the choli and the dupatta and all. I thought that was so wonderful. That was so wonderful walking in. She did not give in to the three-piece lawn jora and
Of
4-inch
course.
heels.
Exactly, exactly. You know, this look that people have. And yet, the pity is, Meherji, that politically we're very well represented identities. Seraiki politicians are there
Yes,
to be found
yes,
in
we
every
are.
major party. We have had prime ministers, we have had chief ministers, we have had governors, we have had presidents. I think if the other
Yes.
identities or the other nationalities in Pakistan were to look around and say, right, who's had a prime minister, who's had chief ministers, who's had a president, who's had governors, we're there. And yet we don't have the kind of representation that we need. There is more than enough time. We're lucky to live in a digital age now where it's very possible to connect people. But I
Yes.
still sense that there is a reluctance. Like, for example, you won't see a lot of content. Every time you want to go on and put Seraiki content there, people will say, but it's Punjabi. It's not. I speak Punjabi
It's
fluently.
not.
I speak Punjabi every day. I have a lot of love and respect for Punjabi. Punjabi is
Of course.
integral to what we are. But I am Seraiki and I speak Seraiki and we are Seraikis. Our language is separate. Just like Sindhi is not Seraiki and is not Punjabi, Punjabi is not Seraiki, Seraiki is not Punjabi. We must. And people say, well, why are you bringing this up now? Why are you talking about this? Why? Because it's important to, because for many, many, many years, we have been overlooked, I don't think it was there in the census for the longest time. And it's only when we stand up and reclaim the identity that we'll get the younger generations interested. Because as you and I spoke about that day, there is this perception of speaking Punjabi or speaking Seraiki as being Pendu. Oh
Yes.
my God. And yet that perception does not exist. I've been across the border. I've been to India and Punjab. They're very proud when they're speaking their language.
yeah.
The diaspora is very proud when they speak to each other in Punjabi. Yet we would rather speak bad Urdu to each other, or even worse, English, than speak to each other comfortably in our own language. So we have to reclaim that. And we have to make sure that there's ample time, especially if we let the young people, the upcoming generation realize that they should be proud of their language and they should be proud of their traditions. And they are now the guardians. They must preserve what their grandparents, and in some cases, they're lucky their great-grandparents are there, must take those stories and those experiences and those narratives and promote them, and most importantly, safeguard them for future generations.
No, absolutely. It's something you raised a very important point, that the clash between the Seraiki and the Punjabi culture. And this is where I personally have an issue as well. When we talk about Punjabi folklore, Punjabi, folk songs, Hassan Lala, they're all from South Punjab. Sassi
Absolutely.
Pannu, Hi Ranjha, they spoke Saraiki. They spoke Jungochi. They did not speak Urdu. They did not speak Punjabi. They certainly did not speak, any other language apart from this. And yet, there's very, I think there is no recognition of their Seraiki identity, whether if you look at it in the Western books who have done a lot of research, even for Seraiki culture, or in Eastern books, they're constantly marketed as Punjabi culture, Punjabi folklore. And I find that so sad that can you not give this small region that little bit of recognition as well? What is
I
the
mean,
issue?
I think the issue is one, of course, that with Punjabi being a more, in the majority, the people think, well, it's so much easier to say Punjabi because people know Punjabi.
Yes.
People know Punjabi in India. People know Punjabi in Pakistan. All right. Well, I don't want to go through the trouble of explaining who Seraikis are, where they come from. You raised a very important point about, all these stories and things. Sufism. When you look at Sufism, Pakistanis and the world at large will tell you, oh, okay, Sindh, and then Punjab. Whereas if you look at the number of shrines, I mean, Multan alone outnumbers everybody else for not just shrines, but very important shrines. Then Uch Sharif, then all the way in the Seraiki belt, almost everywhere. That means this is where the people came. When people talk about, the spread of Islam in the subcontinent coming through to Sindh, But from there, they went to Multan.
Absolutely.
And Multan is where it all went on from. And of course, they're very important shrines across the country. They're very important shrines across the region. But they have their identity. Data Darbar is known as the Lahori shrine, is known as the Punjabi shrine. Shah Abdul Latif is known as the main shrine of Sindh, or be it Abdullah Shah Ghazi. Multan is known for places like Bahauddin Zakriya, Shah Rukn Alam, Shah Gardes, but then Sufism is not attached with Multan. It's not attached to the Seraiki identity. They're all Seraikis. Their works, everything they passed on, Ghulam Farid, all of these things are in Seraiki. A very good point was raised in one of the last episodes that we did, that a lot of what you will hear from even Baba Bulle Shah will have a strong influence of Seraiki, because that is where the movement started from as it went forward. But internationally and more worryingly locally, it's marketed entirely as Punjabi. A lot of people will come and they say, but Multan, yes, administratively, Multan is part of Punjab. Administratively, Bahawalpur is part of Punjab. But Bahawalpur has a very rich history as a state. It was not just any ordinary city. It was a princely state, one of the richest and most important states in the history of India. And the Nawabs of Bahawalpur are as Seraiki as it gets. I mean, they kind of almost look down a little bit on us Multanis in Bahawalpur, because they say you people aren't as staunchly Seraiki as you should be. And yet all we ever hear about Bahawalpur is, yes, they have a Nawab, and that's it. These are cities with so many young people, like you mentioned, the art and craft, the history, the language, all these things are there. But almost nobody talks about it in the context of a Seraiki identity. They talk about it either as part of a Punjabi identity or as part of a Pakistani identity. And I think we need to stand up, reclaim it without saying that we're trying to do anything other than reclaiming what is already ours. And I think a lot of people say, well, why are you bringing up this point now? Or why are you raising up this issue? Why didn't it bother you? So it did bother us. It bothers us every day, just like it would bother someone from Punjab to be called a Seraiki. Because they'd be like, no. And we're not a small little bunch of people. We number in the millions, not just in Pakistan, but like I mentioned, in the diaspora. All these people are connected by a shared heritage, by a shared language, by a shared culture. We should celebrate this rather than looking at it as some kind of a movement that promotes difference. It doesn't. It's a movement that promotes from within Pakistan and promotes a very important part of Pakistan.
Absolutely. You've taken the name of a very important term here, and I'd like to expand upon that. You mentioned marketing. I think that one of the places that we've really lost out is on marketing. And
Badly.
How do you think we can resolve that? I mean, for example, as in our own individual capacities, I'm constantly working with craft in my personal capacity and, of course, through Kaarvan as well. But there's something still that's lacking. Is it the lack of a digital presence? Is it the lack of, like you very, very correctly mentioned, that we've not documented anything? There's no, I find that the last bastion of a civilized world is the written word. And I have a personal bias here as a writer, as an author. So I will always talk about books. But I do feel that if we are not documenting anything, whether it's fiction, non-fiction, anything really, you're not going to be able to market yourself. You're not going to be able to commercialize yourself to, kickstart a movement. Would I be wrong in saying that we need to create a market, a demand for Seraiki, for the Seraiki identity?
Absolutely not. We need to. We need to create that demand. And in many ways, the demand is present there, especially, as yourself, you work in the digital field. I work in the digital field. But when that demand is there, what it needs content. It needs, whether it's the written word, whether it's oral, whether it's videos, whether it's all these things, like you're working with the crafts. When people are being introduced to these crafts, you mentioned a wonderful thing in the podcast about how you train the ladies who do the work to learn to put their own work up on Facebook. Interact with the buyer, not have to go through a sort of a middleman or an agency or rely on others. And all you've done is you've given them the means to do it. You've taught, I'm going to change the phrase here a little bit to fit it. You've taught a woman how to fish as opposed to just giving her fish. That's what we need to do. We need to teach our people how to fish, how to go about there. And the problem is that what we're seeing is that, just the other day, we put up a little thing asking people to share their favorite Seraiki poems or songs or nohas with us. And we got some wonderful things, but we also got some really daft things. And that's because obviously that kind of stuff is there also. And then people are like, oh, it's just a fledgling movement. We have to make sure that the very best content is out there. We have to make sure that we're marketing it, tagging it, showing it to the world. That, this is Seraiki content, whether it's our songs, whether it's our videos, whether it's documentaries, whether it's our food. I mean, people come from far and wide to take Multani son halwa. They talk about son halwa, and yet within the Seraiki belt, I've noticed this with a lot of people, everybody's not happy about it being called Multani son halwa also. The people in Lodra aren't happy. They're like, hey, we make our own son halwa. Stop seeing it as a Multani. There's a lot of local pride also. So we should be doing that. We should be telling people, yes, we have a lot of local regions. There's wonderful food, wonderful history, wonderful culture, whether it's Dirawar Fort, whether it's the amazing buildings in Bahawalpur or Multan, whether it's something as as unknown as Fort Monroe. Fort Monroe is like money for the people of South Punjab. And most Pakistanis will turn around and say, Fort who? Okay, never been there, never heard of it. And sort of like we're happy to keep it our little secret because we don't want people showing up there. We share a border with Sindh. If you look at it, Punjab in itself does not have a border either with KPK or with Sindh. The borders come through South Punjab, come through the Seraiki belt. We are the bastion. We are the people that connect the provinces together. The rivers, when you look at the civilizations, our earliest civilizations, the rivers they started around, the civilization started over there. We have to take ownership of that. We have to take ownership of our history, the past. We have to take ownership of our present. And we definitely have to take ownership of the future. When we have so many young people, you connected me to so many amazing individuals, internationally published authors, whether it's yourself, whether it's Awais, we're looking at people who are doing such amazing work. And yet we're all sitting here kind of oblivious. Seraiki will come up a little bit here. Maybe it'll come up a little bit there, but it won't be talked about. And it's important for people to see us taking that ownership and taking that pride in where we come from, because we can't change where we come from. This is where we're from. This is our identity. And I think when we take that first step, market it and push it in the right way, then the other people will follow because you would have started a movement. And the movement is very simple. The movement is reclaiming the narrative with regards to our identity and talking about Seraiki identity. And I think we should market what is Seraiki as Seraiki. I don't think anybody would be okay with, son halwa being marketed as anything else. You wouldn't have Peshawari chappals marketed as Multani chappals tomorrow. My Nanyal is all Pathan, they'd be up in arms.
Yes, they would be. They certainly would be. But I love the fact that you talk about how the digital realm is the way forward. Because if we look at, for example, recently in New Zealand, the new foreign minister there is somebody from the indigenous. She comes from an indigenous tribe, and now sitting here, we would not have known about it, and it doesn't matter. But the fact that through the digital realm, we've seen this identity come forward on the international level. And she's owning it so beautifully with her markings, with her hair, everything is there. I do believe that the digital realm can bring forth, of course, there will always be, the silly side of things that will always be part of it. But it does certainly bring forth the best of, an indigenous culture. For example, on Facebook, we've got this wonderful group called Multan Matters.
Absolutely.
And I look at what people are saying. I see the posts whenever I can, and I see that there are people who want to do good work. They want to contribute. They want to put their stories out there. They want to put this is disconnect about how to go about it, which is why I feel that with your podcast, why it's picked up so quickly. And it's getting so much attention because it was the first solution, so to speak. Craft is one thing. Craft has been there for a long, long time. Multan pottery, TEFTA ने भी काफी काम किया है, NGOs ने भी काफी काम किया है. लेकिन जहाँ तक बातें आ जाती हैं podcast, for example, is a whole new thing, and it's got a wider audience than, say, the book that I did with Fawzia Qureshi, Multan, A Spiritual Legacy. It's one of its kind. It's the first of its kind in Pakistan. लेकिन हमें वही traction नहीं मिली जो podcast के साथ मिली थी. So definitely, I would say the way forward is to go digitally. Is the content creating? What do you think needs to be done? Do we need to engage the youth in it? Do we need to conduct asking people कि आप memes बनाएं या आप blog बनाएं या आप कोई किताब लिखें? Do you feel that the youth, the Seraiki youth locally, internationally अगर आप देखें, and we'll get to the diaspora.
Welcome back, Ji. Wouldn't be Pakistan without a little bit of internet fun.
Apologies, my apologies. Carrying on, age the youth to be a part of this.
Absolutely. I think why it's important is firstly because they're the ones that are connected with the digital realm. You know, they've grown up. For us, for our parents, to a certain extent, new technology and new gadgets were a bit of a surprise for them. It's not, you know. Most your kids, my child, by the time in the next 10, 15 years, it's all they would have ever known. Smartphones and the internet and all of that stuff. There's very little chance most of them are going to go look for a book for a school project like we used to look through the encyclopedias and things when they have Wikipedia and Google on their fingertips. So we need to engage the youth to take ownership. We need to tell them that, right, you have to make sure that that content is out there, because the beauty of it all is that once you create that content and you put it out there, more often than not, it'll stay there forever. And then, you know, you see people taking an interest in it. We see all these amazing stories. And in Pakistan, to a certain extent, we see people take more interest if someone from abroad has picked it up. So they'll be like, oh, look, you know, this person from a wonderfully rich European country has taken an interest in Sindhi artifacts, and she's making a video about it. I'll watch that. I don't want to watch the fat guy in the Sindhi topi making any videos about it. But I think it's important that we get out there. You want to do it in Seraiki in English? That's great. You want to do it in Seraiki in Urdu? Fantastic. You want to do it in Seraiki only? Do it. But do it. Get out there, create the content, talk about it, you know, bring that conversation there. There are so many, there's so many amazing things. We should be documenting all the wonderful shrines in the region. We should be getting their history. We should be going and talking to the people. There are so many amazing mosques. There's so many amazing temples and gurdwaras that we should be talking about those. I see people connecting with me on Twitter saying, did you know Multan is home to a temple this many years old? And I'm sitting there dumbfounded that I had absolutely no idea. This is someone who went to school in Multan. This is someone who spent so much of my life in Multan, and yet I had no idea that one of the oldest temples in Hinduism was in Multan for the longest time. So we have to get that information out there, and certainly it'll have to be the youth, you know, because obviously the emphasis is there on us also, and we're all doing our part, and I know we'll keep doing it, but it's only when the movement grows and there is more and more of it. Like, I'll give you a small example. It's slightly political, but I think it's very important. When they went and to this old lady in a village, and they went and told her when the newly appointed Chief Minister, Sardar Usman Buzdar Sahab had come, and they were trying to explain to her what a Chief Minister was. And, you know, they were interacting with her. And then they finally said, you remember Shahbaz Sharif Hondai? She said, ha. They said, you know, so they're talking about that now. You're showing this to someone. And suddenly this is telling you what rural life is like. This is telling you how little or how much information exists there. But they can connect. They can connect to the world. So it's important for them to make the content, take the ownership, and also shape it the way they would like to, because they're in touch with the day-to-day struggles of the identity. A lot of them, I've seen a lot of young people write to me and say, I want to come on the podcast, but I don't think my Seraiki is that good because my parents haven't spoken it with me. And I tell them my Seraiki is not perfect, and I've gotten enough complaints
Mine
about
is
it. I've
Mine
gotten
is
enough
either.
complaints, and I said, look, I'm not worried if it's perfect or not. I'm only worried about bringing it out there. I hope mantle is picked up by young people whose Seraiki is superior to mine. As long as the conversation continues to take place, as long as we realize that we can have our voices heard and we talk about, taking back the ownership of what is ours, the young people must step forward. Also because in these last few days, both yourself and I, we realized that you're juggling so many things. I'm trying to juggle a few things. We have kids, we have families. We have a bit of responsibility. The young ones, the Vela ones, should really get up also and take this opportunity and use their energy to reclaim the space. In the space when you put your thing out there. Also, I feel there's a reluctance amongst a lot of our media. There's a reluctance amongst a lot of the players to look at anything that comes in anything that's not English or Urdu. Suddenly, if I want to say, I want to do things in Seraiki, I want to do Seraiki content, but Seraiki kaun sunega? Bhai, 4, 4.5, 5 crore लोग हैं. ये मैं आपको गारंटी से बता सकता हूँ, हर किसी के पास फोन है. They've all got phones, they're all subscribers, they will listen. But give them the content that's worth listening to. That's our job, to make sure that the content, because like you mentioned, all they think about us on the media, or all they think about it when you talk about Seraikis, is those vaderas with the weird buche.
Drama
vaderas who more often than not aren't even speaking Seraiki. That's one of my pet peeves.
It's just shocking.
It is, and the thing is, at least, learn to differentiate, because it's very different. There's a big difference. There's a big difference between how the average Seraiki would look, we're able to tell those differences. We must make sure those, and we're seeing young people, amazing people stand up and take initiative, whether it's for Pashto, we're seeing it with music, whether it's Sindhi, we're seeing it with amazing artists like Ali Gulpir coming out there talking about it. We're seeing, techno music being produced by people from Sindhi backgrounds, including Sindhi in it. We have no excuse. Our youth cannot be lagging behind. We have no excuse. We have all the same facilities that they do. We must take hold of our language. And you want to make it, you want to modernize it, go ahead, because that's how languages survive. They adapt and they survive. I don't think when Seraiki was invented, anybody knew what foon was. Now everybody knows what foon is, and nobody knows what phone is, because that's just how we talk. We adapt it, make it part of our vernacular.
As they say in Djibouti, mobile, no suke kisi ko pata hi nahi tha. And I got that, by the way, after the podcast I did with you. I got a call with someone saying, your Seraiki has a really strong Jangochi touch to it, and I said, कुछ कहा तो है ना मैंने, कुछ कहा तो है ना आगे.
Why shouldn't it have a strong Jangochi touch to it when it's part of your heritage? Why should that be? Why must we have this thing that Seraiki must sound like one way or another? It's got a lot of dialects. DG Khan, DI Khan, Rahimia Khan sound very different to Multan and Bahawalpur. I think we need to embrace it. We need to embrace the different parts of our language, and we need to promote all of them. As long as you're making that effort to talk in Seraiki, I think it's fantastic. Irrespective, someone told me there's a bit of Punjabi. Obviously, there's going to be a bit of Punjabi. I've been living in Lahore for almost 30 years. I speak Punjabi every day. Often I'll start speaking Punjabi to someone over here, and then I'll say, where are you from? And he'll say, I'm from Multan. And I'll say, oh, I'm from Multan. And then we'll both switch to Seraiki, because in a city with millions of Punjabi speakers, you think that's what's going to be done.
No, absolutely. Now, I'd like to ask you about something that you had mentioned, which I think has huge potential as well. The Seraiki diaspora. We hear about Pakistanis going abroad. We hear about them sending remittances home. We often, myself included, we've, approached the government and embassies about the treatment that they face at the hands of their employers and whatnot, and how their rights should be recognized. But here's the thing, Hassan Lala. Nobody really knows this, that the Seraiki diaspora is massive and it's global.
It is.
And it's amazing how they've held on to their culture through language. I'd like you to share your thoughts on the diaspora.
I mean, it's amazing, Ji. When I landed in Saudi Arabia for Umrah with my father and my grandmother, almost from the first person that I met at the airport till the time we flew back, I think I could have gotten by in Saudi Arabia speaking just Seraiki. There were Multanis everywhere in Makkah Sharif. There were Multanis. Our driver driving us at breakneck speed to Medina Park was from Bahawalpur. We ran into people from Jhang. We ran into people from all over. And I probably spoke more Seraiki on that trip than I spoke English or Urdu, because the overwhelming majority of people were from there. Every time I've been to Dubai, and I've gone and, my friends will go with me and we'll kind of be in a taxi, and obviously I'll run into people, a lot of taxi drivers are Pathans. That's my maternal side. And then we'll go to places and, we'll interact with people who do most of your heavy lifting and that kind of work. And to a man, almost to a man, they're all from the Seraiki belt. And I'll start chatting with them. And my friends will literally be like, tu isko bhi janta hai, tu isko bhi janta hai. And I'll be like, they're all from my area. If you ever look at flights, international airlines came to DG Khan because of the demand for flights. International airlines from Bhutan's to the Gulf, there's so many flights because there is such a demand, because people are coming and going. And they are proudly, unabashedly, unapologetically Seraiki. They're very proud of it. They don't hide it. From the way they dress, to the way they speak, to the way they eat. And here we are, thinking, oh my God, do I really want to come across that Seraiki? I'm a little bit worried, if I'm going out to a coffee shop, should I just say, bhai, do de de, ya please give me two, instead of saying, yara, 2 cup coffee de de, because I'm thinking to myself, will people think, and they're unashamed. They run into you, they're happy to see you, they're very happy to talk about the region, they're very happy to talk about our poetry, they're telling you how they kept things alive. In the old days, through video cassettes and audio cassettes, and now they proudly take out their phone and say, Haji, ala suniya, and then they'll play it. They'll play the latest songs. They say, oh, we don't miss a single wedding. The family sends us WhatsApp clips and everything. So the diaspora has massive potential. And as you mentioned, they're the ones sending back remittances. They're the ones representing Pakistan. Something in their language, something close to their identity must be put out there. It's something I discussed with Hasnan Bhai. If you call the passport office, you have the option to talk in Seraiki. But if you call helplines for corporate companies, there is no interest, there is no offer. Whereas in Canada, if you call corporate banks helplines, you have English, French, and Punjabi. There are not that many Punjabis in Canada as there are Seraikis in Pakistan. I can assure you of that. Yet we don't have, and a lot of the call center operators are Seraikis. They're more than capable of having a conversation in Seraiki with the person calling them. But the person calling them has to try and speak in stilted, broken Urdu, and the person at the other end has to answer them in his best impression of Urdu, when they can both easily communicate what needs to be done with each other in the language. But there is a reluctance, there is this kind of thing, so when you make it more acceptable, when you make it more prevalent, when you make it, for lack of better words, cool, they'll all jump on the bandwagon. Everybody will say, Gigi, bilkul, Seraiki mein options ne. I'll go into most stores, most places in Multan. I'll speak Seraiki. If the other person doesn't, I'll switch to Urdu. That's fine. A lot of people in Multan are not Seraiki speaking. They're Punjabi speaking, Urdu speaking, wherever from. That's fine with me. But I'll always start off in Seraiki. And if they speak it, we'll have that conversation with each other. So we must take away this stigma, Meherji, because it is a stigma that, oh my God, look at, and the best thing I get is, but aap to padhe likhe hain. As if somehow padhe likhe log Seraiki nahi bol sakte. And it really makes me think about the young students that are coming through in their hundreds of thousands, getting degrees, educating themselves, learning, only to be told that their education is only worth it if they can speak English. If they can't speak English, the next best hope is Urdu. And if they can speak Seraiki, the best they can hope for is to be a PN somewhere or something like that. I think it's grossly unfair. And also it's not right, because we must make sure someone who has the correct talent, if they can only speak Seraiki, we must make sure that there are no hurdles in their path if they want to go forward. It shouldn't just be that singing is the only way to come out of it, because you'll only get one person. One person will sing a Chitta Chola and make it and be feted for a few days and then forgotten. He's back to selling chai wherever he was. Nobody has gone on and picked him up and given him the opportunity for a better life. So we must make sure that, I mean, there should be documentaries in Seraiki. There definitely need to be more dramas in Seraiki where there is not a single Vadera. Absolutely no
Yes,
Vadera. They should be
please.
banned because urban
And even if there
Multan,
is,
like
please have the correct representation. Because
the
like
correct
you have
representation
on him, you know, and not
and
wearing the Hindi topi.
Urban Multan has no Vaderas. Urban Multan has, you know,
No, none.
fantastic young entrepreneurs. Urban Multan has fantastic people who are policy makers. I mean, we have so many well-read, amazing, wonderful people, people that I've connected to who are as Multani as it gets. Whether they're working in
Yes,
the media, whether it's, you know, amazing people like Ali Aka, whether it's Fahad Maral, these people, they're so well read and so up to date. These are economists. These are policy
yes,
makers. इन पे ड्रामे बनाओ भाई, दिखाओ कि हमारे लोग ये भी बड़े जरूरी काम करते हैं, ब्यूरोक्रेसी में भी काम करते हैं, हमारे लड़के सिपाही भी हैं, ऐदे वफा gave you one Seraiki character and look at how people fell in love with him. Everybody going around saying Basti Maluk, Basti Maluk. There are thousands of such Bastis. There are millions of such boys, and they all have that potential. So we must make sure that we utilize, you know, some goodwill. I'll give them great credit for putting that character there, because again, a large part of our armed forces are people from our belt. They're the ones out there
absolutely.
working. They're doing amazing work. So
Absolutely.
why
So,
must we only talk about, you know, us and the worst thing is, we have to get rid of the stigma. It's there from others, but I think it comes down onto us, and we don't take
it
the
is.
pride that we should in our language and our culture.
Absolutely. I think this is something that, you know, it's very important. And this sort of ties in with the marketing and the digital realm and whatever initiatives are taken. So even with your podcast, for example, it's what you're putting out there, what it represents. Um, like you very correctly said that you know, when you tell someone you're from Multan, immediately they have this vision of you sort of guzzling down mangoes and
Yeah.
sitting, you know, widespread Begum style on a sofa, you know, chitta chola paake with a dhoti underneath, and you're just, you know, having dancing girls around. You know, it just gets worse from here, and you're just like, well,
Yeah.
that's not true. I mean, when I look at my own parents, for example, we come from a very humble background. We, you know, my mother went to school on a tanga, for example. My father literally landed in Britain with just a few pounds in his pocket. You know, you have to build up from it. And yet there was this sense of pride. You know, Seraiki was always spoken at home. Like you said, we picked it up by ear. Punjabi was spoken at home. Entire upbringing, I'm not doing justice to my background, and I need to work on that by putting out. We need to really sort of change that perception, and that comes from us, from our generation.
Gee, absolutely. It has to come from within, and also I think we have to take the ownership. Okay, just lost you again. The internet does not want Seraiki identity to go through. So that's one of the other challenges we're facing.
Hello. This is a Hello, I'm back again.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Hi. Yes, I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. I just realized I've also taken up a lot more of your time than
No,
initially
no,
what I promised. So
I'm very, very
let
happy to talk about this. I think it's just so important what you're doing here, especially the work that you do with the crafts people, because, like you said, it's very integral to our society, to our identity. And I think it's important for them to also look at having those ways. And one other thing is very important for our young generation is to find more and more ways to connect them to not just people within
and I think we're
Pakistan, but
doing
within the
that.
world.
We're-
Well, I think,
I mean, the
young
podcast, like you
entrepreneurs,
initially said, it's bringing forth people from all, areas. You've got
it
political
is.
actors, non-political actors, activists. It's wonderful. They're all coming forward and they're all sharing their stories, and I genuinely think that this is going to build up to something.
Inshallah. And I think the other amazing thing is when I look at how many strong women are there, how many amazing, strong, successful women are there, because there again is this perception that women from South Punjab and from the Seraiki belt are weak. And I want to put it on record, that's just not true. That is absolutely not true. They are amongst the strongest people you will ever find anywhere, and especially in Pakistan. Seraiki women are
Yeah.
as tough as it gets. We have heard so many times stories of women who will be running homes, running farms, giving birth, and then back out there working again. It takes immense amount of strength, physical and mental, to do that. So I think we need to break down that also, that this false narrative and this false thing, Savli Saloni is sitting at home eating mangoes covered from head to toe. No, she will pick the stick of the hookah and beat you with it. So be careful and don't keep such antiquated thoughts in your mind.
No, absolutely. I think that's a wonderful note to end the session with. Hassan Lala, I'm so grateful to you because you've really not just this, cultures as well, other cultures as well, in terms of understanding that आप कुछ करना चाहते हो, लेकिन आप क्या कर सकते हो? And I think what you've really said here tonight in terms of creating content, having sensible content, taking that first step that so many of us are so scared कि पता नहीं क्या थीसी, क्या हो जाएगा, लोग क्या कहेंगे. ओ भाई, आप कुछ पहले करो. तो you're spot on कि with the digital realm now readily available at everyone's hands with smartphones, and everyone has one. अच्छा है, बुरा है, सस्ता है, महंगा है, तो सही ना. तो उसके थ्रू आप कुछ ना कुछ करें. So I really feel that you have so much to offer with terms of setting out a digital strategy, putting the content out there. I mean, this session, I think, really should be seen by anyone who's interested in furthering indigenous culture in terms of representation, in terms of content, in terms of perception. There's a whole PR lesson here. So is there anything else that you'd like to add that we've not touched upon that I may have missed out?
No, I think it's been wonderfully informative for me also. I hope also for everyone watching, because the important thing is, like you said, there's this thing, you worry about ridicule. You worry about the fact that someone will say, oh, only 3 people saw. I don't care if only one person sees. I'm not making it for likes. I'm not making it for today. 10 years from now, it might have 20 million views. Think long term, and think about reclaiming the space. Think about reclaiming your identity, and it'll start slowly, and you'll slowly get there. And like you said, sensible, wholesome content that is relevant content that talks about our amazing history that you've spoken about, talks about our folklore, talks about our past, talks about our contributions to Pakistan. Talk about that. You have so much to do. If you just get down to that, if we just get down to that, that I think by doing that, we'll be doing both Pakistan and the Seraiki people a big favor. And hopefully, slowly, we'll get there. And, through sessions like yours, through the work that you do, through the work that the other amazing people do, and most importantly, I think what we really want to push across is, and I think it needs to be pushed across to our parents. You mentioned your family's humble beginnings, and yet here you are, if they'd had a backward thinking bone in their body, you wouldn't be where you are today. So we need to also show about how important it is when parents are forward thinking and letting their children, irrespective of their gender, go ahead out there and take over the world. And we must do that because there's more to Seraiki women and women of our area. They make amazing crafts and they do all of that, but there's more to them, and we must push for. So there's another Meher Hussain, so there is another Nuzhat Siddiqui or a Nikhil Dar. These must come forward. And if we can do that for even one person, then I think we can be proud of what we've done.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now my laptop is telling me your internet connection is not stable. So before we have another blackout, I'd like to say thank you once again, Hassanala, for joining us. I appreciate it so very much. I've taken up far more of your time than scheduled. To the people watching, my apologies for my poor internet. We had a good meet tonight again. So flawlessly after we've uploaded the video with all the edits. Seraiki podcast, it's available on Facebook. There's also a wonderful Facebook page called Multan Matters, in which a lot of people have come forward to discuss all issues or concerns, everything about Multan. Anyone wishing to connect with Twitter account, please send in your feedback. And a separate thing, it's inherently Pakistani. The Seraiki belt is possibly the very essence of what it means to be Pakistani. So join us. आए हमारे साथ हाथ मिलाएं. ये नहीं है, ये पूरे मुल्क के लिए है. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Meherji. All the very best to you. Thank you.
Khuda Hafiz.
Khuda Hafiz.